everybody. Donna Schwartz here from the Everything Saxophone podcast, and I'm here with my new friend, Chase Huna. Now, we met, I know about him because I follow him on the socials, but we met at the NAMM show 2024. He was at the Cannonball Instruments booth, and I wanted to get to know him, and I'm so happy that I have you on the podcast, Chase.
Yeah, Donna, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. You're doing so many really cool things. Like you're playing with Al Stewart. You're playing with the Slim Man Band in where you live in the Palm Springs area, all that kind of stuff. You're playing a lot of the music that I loved growing up, that late 70s, early 80s, you know, type of like progressive rock where there were sax solos. There were sax solos that were meaningful on the
Yeah.
radio and stuff. And I think that's so, so cool. Could you ever have imagined yourself when you were 10 doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah, you know what? If you told me a year ago that I would be playing with prog rock guys, rockers from the 70s and 80s, I would say, you don't know what you're talking about, because I've my whole career I've always played jazz or I've always mainly been like a contemporary jazz artist. So I figure, this is the route I'm going to take. These are the musicians I'm going to play with my whole life, and this is just going to be the thing. And then all of a sudden, I get a call one day to go do a gig with Al Stewart. And I thought in the back of my mind, I pictured Rod Stewart because I thought, oh, Rod Stewart, Al Stewart, they're the same person, right? So then I look up Al Stewart and I'm like, oh, you know what? I actually was not familiar with You're the Cat and, a couple of his other songs like Time Passages. There are some artists in that genre like John Ford Collier or Ambrosia where you hear their music. I was exposed to their music like biggest part of me, right? That's played on smooth jazz stations. So you hear that, you hear John Ford Coley's I'd Really Love to See You Tonight, that type of, 70s, 80s rock. But in terms of Al's stuff, I hadn't heard it before, but I really have come to love it. I love playing with Al. And back to, to answer your question, I couldn't have pictured myself being a prog rock saxophonist right now. It's a different turn, but I really, really love it a lot. It's a different style of playing, obviously, for me, going from a contemporary, more, mellow, you're going to play as smooth as possible to there's this edgy tone in those solos from the recordings, right? And you're just trying to match those recordings as similar as possible on stage so that it conveys to the audience. And it's always the coolest thing when we go out and sign, like, talk to people afterwards. They love that they can hear these solos or hear these songs, and they say they, flash back to the first time they heard those songs or when they grew up with those songs, what they were doing at the time. And it's a cool feeling for me that I can kind of convey that emotion back to them. So yeah, does that answer the question a little bit?
Yeah, that's really cool
Yeah.
that you're mentioning this. And let's dive deeper into the progressive rock. Some people call it yacht rock, actually,
Yes.
and all
Yes.
that kind of thing. But in terms of like the differences and stuff, you're saying like the tone is there's a little bit more of an edge to it, compared to contemporary jazz and all that kind of thing. But all right, yeah, I have a bunch of questions. The first one is this. So, you're taking these gigs, you're playing these songs. Are you playing the recorded solos or are you creating your own or are you referencing them? What are you doing?
I am mostly playing the recorded solos as close to the record as possible. So for example, the saxophonist that was on Al Stewart's songs, which would be, the big song on the radio. He doesn't play that one live. He plays obviously You're the Cat and Time Passages. And the saxophonist on those records was a guy named Phil Kenzie. And, people want to hear the songs exactly how they remember them, right? Because they want that same feeling of how they felt when they first heard those songs. So they remember, what they were going through or where they were at in life. And I play them basically as to the record as possible. So any little, nuances and fills solos that he does, maybe he bends a note here, maybe he, does a little flutter here. And even if it's not to the same style that I play, I try to do those little nuances, right? So I mimic the same exact, you're swelling this note here, you're playing this little trill right here, and I'm going to do it the exact same way as the record because that's how people want to hear it. And same thing if I'm playing with an ambrosia. Sax player Ernie Watts was the guy that recorded Biggest Part of Me, and he recorded on tenor sax. But same thing, whenever I play with Ambrosia, I'm trying to play the same exact way that Ernie played. So just to, bring that, same emotion into it.
I love the way um emotion, memories. It's so interesting because when I was playing in cover bands many, many years ago, I thought that I had to play the recorded solo because for me as a musician, like, I'm listening to this stuff on the radio and I remember I remember those solos. But, then over time I was like, no, I guess I don't have to, because
Right.
people, as I was told, people are listening to the words, they're not listening to the sax solo. And I'm like,
Yes.
I don't know how you're not, but okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
But
I feel like it differs between what the gig is, right? Like if you're playing Baker Street in a cover band, you can probably, you play the da da dun dun da, but then afterwards, if you're soloing, you just go, right? Because that's a song and that's a space where you can just play whatever your heart feels or whatever you feel. But I've noticed, especially with Al fans, because they are very like they love when his songs are just to the T, to the record. So, we see videos that people post online and people comment on stuff, and they really love when we stick to the original recordings. Or I read one comment one time that was they love how I'm faithful to the original recording. So yeah, yeah. But like you said, different settings, different gigs call for different ways to play a solo, right?
yeah, okay, so this is a great conversation because a lot of people always have these questions,
Yeah.
and the thing is, I think also about like, this you're not in a tribute band, you're in the band, right? But with
Yes.
people with a lot of tribute bands and stuff like that, you always have to ask the question from the band leader, do you want the recorded solo or not? And,
Yes.
that's really important. But the other thing too, though, when you think about it, like bands like Ambrosia, that are still touring and whatever, the live version can be different than the recorded version. And
Yes.
in that case, does that give you, have you encountered that? Does that give you more freedom to, you may play like the solo, the recorded solo, but maybe it's extended so you do your own thing?
There are certain instances where that is the case. I'd say You're the Cat, right? We draw it out at the end because it's the last song in Al's set. So instead of in the recording, it's a fade out, he's playing the sax solo. So at the end, it goes three times through the sax solo, and then they do like three hits. They'll do one, I solo, do another, I solo, and then there's a high C on alto at the very end, altissimo C. But I would say the first time through, I play as the recording. But because the recording fades out and there's not like the sax solo, I take that, and obviously I ask the band leader, say, hey, what would you like me to do here? Um, I take that as, okay, this is going to be a solo that I can make up. But I want to make sure that I'm not gonna be like this smooth jazz guy when it comes to this part, right? I still need to mimic the playing that the original sax player played on the recording. So if he's playing this way, I am going to, I'm going to improv at the end because it calls for it because there's no, set solo so I can make up whatever I want, but I'm going to make sure that stylistically I'm playing the same exact way that the guy did on the recording. So whatever, little flares, or like what I was mentioning earlier, whatever trills he does on certain notes, I'm going to make sure that I keep that in my solo improved. Yeah.
Okay, this is great. And
Yeah.
keeping the same stylistic nuances and all that kind of thing, that's cool. What about I in the back of my mind, I think about people that they have the past to play a solo and all that kind of thing, and then they just start throwing in like a lot of technique, bebop
Yeah,
this and all that other kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah,
But that's really not stylistic of what was going on at the time in that kind of
right.
music. So like
Yeah,
in terms of like, as you're thinking about your lines that you're playing, um yeah, let me ask you like what's going on in your mind as you're
yeah.
improvising.
Yeah, well, basically, I am just thinking about what would Phil play here. I'm thinking about what I had played earlier, what the original solo was, right? And then I am taking that near the end of the song. This is still You're the Cat. And I'm going to make up something in my mind that sounds like what I think would be something he would play. And yeah, bring that to the table. Yeah,
And do you ever get and I know this is still sort of fairly new for you, but does it ever get you burned out or it's kind of like the Broadway pit musicians where they're playing the same book and they're doing 10 shows a week and
yeah,
they're with this company and of course it's a great job so you're definitely going to keep it, but they're playing the same stuff for like
yeah,
years and years and years. You get to the
yeah,
point where you're reading magazines every time you have a little bit of a break from playing and you don't even need to count or anything like that. You just know when to
yeah.
put it down and come in. Do you,
Right, right.
have you found yourself getting a little bit bored or burned out from doing the same, stuff night after
Yeah. No, I would say not one bit. I would say, I am much more comfortable now in terms of knowing the songs, right? Knowing when to come in, like I never had to like count in my mind. Usually I'm just picking stuff up by ear. But I know that once this guitar solo is over, I'm going to solo for one more time and then we're going to do this at the end. And it's really, really fun. Yes, it is like the same exact thing every single time that we play. But I think what I love is Al tells a lot of stories in between the shows, which are wildly entertaining. If you've ever watched his show or if you have a chance to go see his show, you should because he's a great storyteller. He loves history a lot, so he tells a lot of historical stories in between songs, and that's actually what he wrote a lot of his music about was historical events. Um, but in terms of, what you said, getting bored or like, the show becoming repetitious, I don't think I'd ever feel that at all because of the crowd being there. Sorry about that. The crowd being there, right? Um, they what we were talking about earlier, how these people come to see Al because this is the guy that they grew up listening to at a very young age, whether they were, still in school or maybe they were in their late 20s, early 30s, whatever age they were at, they remember Al's songs and they were somewhere in life when they first heard these songs and fell in love with them. So to get to see that live as an audience member, to get to see that live I feel is very, very cool. And just to be the one to convey, this music and these emotions to these people is something that you can never really get bored of because then you hear different stories every single night from people that you talk to after the shows, or they'll bring up vinyls after the shows. We had one person bring up this 300-page like Al Stewart novel, not a book that he wrote, but just kind of like this autobiographical book about Al and the history of Al and all his music and photos from the stage and photos with, Peter White was in the band at the time he toured with Al for years. Peter Wood, the keyboard player, was in the band as well. Keyboard or guitar player was in the band as well, and the other members, Phil Kenzie, the sax player. Um, but it's really great to just hear the words of the people come out after the show, how they loved it and how they loved that, we stick to the original recorded versions of these songs. And that's something that could never get old for me. So yeah.
It's so cool because wait, when were you what year were you born?
1999.
Yeah, so way after, way
Yeah,
after this stuff was on the radio.
right.
That's really, it's really kind of interesting because you're keeping the music alive. And you know, like for me, I was very young, you know, when Al Stewart's music came out, when Ambrosia's music came out. But you know, I remember it. I was pretty young, but I remember it. And
Yeah,
to me, I just thought the songs during that time, the yacht rock, the progressive rock, I thought those songs were really, really good. You know,
yeah,
just
yeah,
really well written songs, you know, with good stories, great solos, um,
yes.
iconic solos, and all that kind of thing. And I think it's so cool that, you know, that the audience is still there for that. And do you find that you're getting some new audience members, younger members that, you know, like yourself, weren't born in during those times, but you know, just found out and are attending these shows?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I would say I would say slowly but surely, right? Because, as time goes on, we all get older and music progresses as well as audience, who's attending what shows. So for people to listen to this kind of music, obviously it has to become younger at some point, right? I would say the greatest example of that is I love to watch what is popular with Spotify and streaming, streaming numbers and stuff. And there's a good percentage of streams on Spotify. I want to say it's in the 75 plus percent range, where all of Spotify's streamed music is older music, right? So we're talking about Ambrosia and Al Stewart and musicians from those decades. You could take 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. A lot of kids are listening to that type of music, right? And another great example is this music also ends up in a lot of modern movies. I was just watching the other day, Anchorman 2, and John Ford Coley's I'd Really Love to See You Tonight comes on. It's like, there you go, right there. And I know that, with social media platforms such as TikTok and others that are progressing or changing throughout the years as we go on here, a lot of music will be brought up on TikTok or become popular on apps like that, right? And it could be older songs. I remember there was Bobby Caldwell's What You Won't Do for Love was a trending song on TikTok for a while. And that's what, 90s, right? That came out in the 90s, I
So
believe.
yeah.
And so older music it's not like I don't feel like my generation of kids are necessarily looking for that music, but it's apps, social media apps like TikTok where they are discovering older music. So they could, Ambrosia's biggest part of me could be the next viral one to hit the app and everyone's going to be exposed to that sound. And then, that's the hit song for a little bit to a younger generation now. So it's it's about exposing younger people just in a different way, right? Because there's no more, I want to say, vinyl's making a comeback, right? But it's not like it was in the 70s, 80s where there were record stores, and the way that you discovered music was either radio or you go to the record stores and you're buying vinyl just because you're looking for something. And now the younger generation, it's like they have Spotify and you could be looking for new stuff, but I feel like as a kid, for me specifically, if I like a certain if I like a certain style of music, but I want to find something new, I'm most likely going to be looking for something similar to that and not so much like way out of left field, right? So if there could be a kid that listens to rap all day, right? But he wants to find something new. I don't feel like he's going to go looking for yacht rock. It seems like two different worlds, right? So I think the the ability to have apps such as, Instagram Shorts is another great example, similar to TikTok. Similar to TikTok and what they do, same as YouTube Shorts. It seems like that's the way to get this kind of music exposed to a younger generation. So I know that was a long, kind of broad answer, but yeah,
Yeah, no, I think it's cool, and also, just the fact that you mentioned, songs being placed in movies, or
yeah,
placed in TV shows or commercials and stuff like that.
yes,
That's what made, I think, Girl from Ipanema, that was featured in that Netflix. Oh gosh, I forgot the series, but I know, like, for many many private parties after that, came out, people were requesting that song. I'm like, and I
yeah,
wasn't watching that Netflix series. I'm thinking, wow, that's really weird. Okay, this is good, but it's
yeah,
it's that kind of influence for sure. Um,
yeah,
do you find that with the music that you're playing now, because I know you do have other projects coming up, but how much of an influence is all the stuff that you're touring with Al and with Ambrosia and other people? How much of an influence is that music having on you as a person and how you approach your own music?
yeah. I believe it's so great for me, right? Because as a musician, you could you as a songwriter, let's say as a songwriter, you could focus in one specific genre of writing, right? Say mine is contemporary jazz, smooth jazz. But I feel that it is important for me to also know what progressive rock sounds like and what their songs kind of are made up of, what chord structures they use, or what different instruments are used in their recordings compared to something that I'm trying to write for contemporary jazz. Same as if I were to listen to pop. I listen to pop, I'd say regularly every day is part of my music rotation, but it's just another way to kind of broaden your mind in music writing, right? Because now you know different genres and what they're supposed to sound like. Or you could take, it seems like pop nowadays is using some jazz influences in a couple different ways, whether it's chord structures or, they could have a nice little Rhodes pad in the very beginning of the song with a nice little, four chord, maybe ninth chord progression. And it's like, it's cool. So they're discovering ways to make pop not just the same four chord progression, but, exposing yourself to as much music as possible, I've always thought is such a beneficial thing as a musician. And it's just going to expand your ears. It's going to expand your musical horizons, if you want to call it that, and just make you an overall better songwriter.
Yeah, and also unique too. Definitely unique. I'm
Yeah.
just thinking about the story with Derek Brown, beatbox sax. We talk about this often and how, he was a dime a dozen saxophone player in college, but
Yeah.
then he started to get curious about world music
Yeah.
and how to create those sounds just on the saxophone. And then
Yeah.
off he went into his lane.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. It's hearing as a musician, you can always like I said, broaden your musical horizons. You can always be listening to new stuff. I love to listen to new stuff as much as possible because it just gets my mind thinking of different ideas. Oh, how can I apply an idea like this to contemporary jazz or something that I'm writing? Or, vice versa. Maybe one day I become a songwriter over multiple genres and I write songs for other people. So you never, I mean, and that's the cool thing about music. You never know. Like I said, I didn't know that I was going to be a prog rock saxophonist playing with Al if you told me a year ago. But you never know where music is going to take you. So just to be able to adapt as many skills to your arsenal as you can, or just to have as many skills, whether it's songwriting or producing or recording or playing multiple instruments. It's like you can never learn enough. Even if you think everything on saxophone, it's like, well, actually, Michael Brecker knew about 100 times more things than you did. So, keep learning. It's crazy. It's a big, big, broad world. So, yeah,
This is so cool. You know what I want to do? I want to go back to when you were 10 years old, and
yeah,
that's when you first started playing saxophone. Was
Yeah.
there something before age 10 that, you said, "Oh, I want to," like what made you say, "I want to play saxophone"?
Well, the story goes like this. I always loved listening to jazz music as a kid. A lot of parents will put their kids to sleep at night listening to Beethoven or Bach, classical music, and I wanted to listen to smooth jazz. I had a record that my uncle burned, he burned 20 songs on a CD off his computer, but they featured artists, smooth jazz artists like Peter White and Mindy Abair. Acoustic Alchemy was one of them. My mom's a huge Acoustic Alchemy fan. Another was a band called Bonafide, which is actually a project by Slim Man. And they had a number one hit way back when it was called X-Ray Hip. And this song was also on that CD. So I had this CD. I loved listening to it because it had saxophone. It had just sounds that for some reason I liked. Like my brain liked listening to this. So we went to a concert out in Palm Desert. They've got a little concert series every winter out in Palm Desert. It's called the El Paseo Gardens concert series, I guess. And there was a sax player playing that night, which ended up being my brother's best friend's dad. He played saxophone, and I saw this at 7 years old, and that's kind of when I made the decision. I was like, man, it sounds really cool to me, but he also looks really cool while doing it. So I was like, okay, this is, something maybe I'd like to do. And in fourth grade, we got the little plastic recorders, if you remember those.
Oh yeah.
Um, we ordered them. The music teacher said they'd be coming in 30 days, and I bugged her every single day. Are they in yet? Are they in yet? Are they in yet? And finally, after 30 days, like she said, they came in and they gave us hot cross buns, mother and a baby, and hot cross buns too. And simple three-note songs, but I had them down in the first day. And I was so excited to go play them for my not even before I got home. I think I was practicing them in the car ride home. And then I went to go play them for my mom and she saw, wow, you picked it up pretty quick. And my dad also saw that, so they said, "What would you think about maybe playing a saxophone?" I said, "Yeah, that'd be really, really cool." So I ended up getting one for my 10th birthday. It was a Cannonball, and I've been playing ever since. So that's kind of the story there.
Is it okay? Was it an alto sax?
It was an alto sax. Yeah, yeah. Thankfully it was alto, tenor at the time. I was, regular sized kid, but a 10-year-old is small, so a tenor's could be a little too big. A Barry's going to be as tall as me, right? So alto was the nice one to start on. Yeah.
That's cool that it was a cannonball. Do you still have that horn?
I do. Yes. I don't have it in the room with me right now, but I still do have it. I'm never getting rid of it because it was a Cannonball. They call it an Alcazar. It's their student model, but I can never get rid of that because it's like that's how I started. And you know, also to say it's a really, really great horn. It plays amazing, even for a student model. Like now I've got a bunch of their pro series horns and stuff, but for a student model horn, it's great. It's really, really great, but I can never get rid of it. I've still got it sitting around and yeah, yeah.
So cool. And
Yeah.
their horns are like workhorses, you know what I mean? So they're like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
quality, durable, all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, yeah, no, they really are. They're great. I mean, I've got a couple sitting right here. The tenor that I've this was my first tenor, the Raven series, right?
Right.
And this is their most popular line of saxophone is the Raven, and it's really great because it's just got an amazing tone to it. Everyone at the factory does what they call acoustic customization, where they play through the horn. They're all players at the factory. So they pay attention to just the little subtle details of, you know, making sure the horn is going to be in tune with every single note that you play. Like nothing is going to be out of tune. Like if you play an F sharp one way, or if you play it with the side F sharp, both are going to be in tune and they're not going to, nothing's going to be out of place with their horns. They're built solid. They sound amazing. The tone with every single one is great. And you get a couple different necks with each one as well, which is kind of awesome. They make what's called a fat neck. Um, I'll show you right here, which gives it more of a warmer, kind of rounder sound. Octave keys on the bottom, obviously there. And then they make their traditional neck as well, where the octave key is over the top of the neck. But yeah, yeah, they're really, really great horns, and they're a great company, great people to work with.
That's cool. And with
Yeah.
okay, so with the fat neck and having the underslung octave key compared to the traditional, do you notice any, aside from the warmer sound, I understand that, but do you notice any difference in terms of like response of notes or anything like that or no?
I would say if I would put it like this, if you're going to use the traditional neck, I would use it for something that I want to play as perfect as possible, right? So when I play with Al, I'm playing my alto because that's what the songs were in the recordings. I'm playing my alto with the traditional neck because I don't want the sound to be too broad. It's like I know exactly how I want it to sound like, and with the traditional neck, I can get that sound. If you want to play with the fat neck, it's really cool because I love playing this with jazz where you can be more expressive with notes and you can search for different tones or like if you want to hit overtones with certain things. It's like this is the neck that you most likely want to be playing on. Not to say that you can't hit that also with the traditional style neck, but I've just noticed with the Slim Man band, I mostly play the fat neck, whichever horn I'm playing. And it allows me to be, like I said, more expressive, gives it a warmer sound, more round sound, and just kind of specifically amplifies your jazz playing.
That's cool.
Yeah,
And just the fact that you mentioned like when you play with the Slim Man band, which by the way, folks, I'm familiar with the Palm Spring area and stuff, and whenever the Slim Man band plays, it's usually at Vicky's of Santa Fe, which is a great restaurant,
yeah.
but you always get sold out. It's like getting
Yeah,
hard
yeah,
to get in.
I'd say still come in, you can find a seat or you can sit at the bar. It's a really, really great venue. We've been playing there for the past 5 to 6 years. I want to say I think I started playing there with Slim when I was 19 years old. And it's just been a really, really great home. It's a great weekly gig for me. It's only a 10-minute drive up the road, so it's really great. But in terms of you know, great music venues in the Coachella Valley, Palm Springs area, I'd say Vicky's is the top. It's really great. They've got music. Right now, season's winding down, but usually during season, they've got music 6 to 7 nights a week. They've got everything from pop to country to, you could find a band playing yacht rock in there. You can find the Slim Man band in there. You can find a band playing jazz hit like traditional jazz standards on Sunday afternoons. It's really really great and it's a cool lounge what they've got. They've got one side of the restaurant is the dining section. They've got the bar in the middle and then they've got a lounge on the other side and that's where the music is at. They also serve dinner on that side, but it's really really a great venue, great staff and we love playing there. We absolutely love it. Yeah.
I'm gonna go down this route for a second because this is for
Yeah.
my own curiosity
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
I'm always around that area, the Palm Desert area and stuff like that. What other I know there's a McCallum Theater. Um,
Yes.
Also it's another great venue, and then you've got the casinos there, where
Yes.
you get a lot of like local and national talent coming in. Um,
Yeah.
when you were I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but when you were starting to play more and more, um, where was the first place that you played out, and like was it with Slim Man or were you
Yeah.
doing your own stuff?
So first place I played out, I was 10 years old. And so it was at a restaurant that, again, another one of my brother's friend's parents owned this restaurant in Palm Desert. And they had a jazz band in there playing, it was like a four-piece jazz band playing standards from 7 to 10 every night. And there was one night, and this was when I was in fifth grade. I was 6 months into playing sax, so I sounded like I'd been playing for 6 months. And the middle school band, the Palm Desert Middle School Band, jazz, was going in there. They were sending a couple kids in to go play with the regular guys that played every Tuesday.
Wow.
So the owner of the restaurant let my dad know because he heard that I'd been playing saxophone. He said, bring your kid down. So I go with dad down there, and the guy who was leading, the guy's name was Bill. He was a bass player who was on the bandstand leading the kids and everything, and he ran every Tuesday. And he sees this other kid walk in the restaurant, and everyone else, it's a retirement community out here in Palm Springs, as we like to say. And so everyone else is about 3, 4 times my age. And in walks this kid, and he thinks, oh, he's with the middle school band. He's just showed up late for some reason. And so he comes over, he's like, hey, what's your name? I'm Chase, you play? I'm like, yeah, I play sax. You got your sax with the band? I'm like, yeah, 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 sure. So I go up, and these kids don't know who I am. And, Bill thinks I know these guys like they're my buddies. And we end up playing a couple songs. One of them I remember was Moon Dance because at the time it's like, learning a couple songs was so important to me. And my very first song I learned was In the Mood by the Glenn Miller Orchestra. So I was from a very young age playing more jazz standards rather than, the contemporary stuff or prog rock or whatever. I was playing jazz standards starting out. And especially, I would go back and play with this. I would go up and sit in with this band every Tuesday at this restaurant. And then I started gigging or, sitting in with different bands around the area just from 10 years old on. And so, really, I started playing in front of people at 10 years old. I started, gigging for money. I think at 12 years old, I was playing outside. Or inside certain hotels, like in the little clubs or bars and stuff. And yeah, yeah. So I've just been doing this from a very, very young age, and then started going out to Orange County and LA and started kind of broadening out a little bit. I'd say once I got into high school. And then right out of high school, I started touring with a Bruno Mars tribute band. This was a tribute band. It wasn't real Bruno Mars
Yeah.
tribute band, and we actually toured around the country uh,
Wow.
in multiple states. So that was a whole lot of fun. But in terms of where I got my start, it was just sitting in with different bands or around bars and clubs here in the area.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. Different story than probably what you expected, but yeah.
That's a cool story though. And
Yeah.
the thing that's striking me is that were you nervous? I mean, especially that first gig, like, realizing no one knows you and you just, oh, just
Yeah.
strutting in and yeah, sure, I belong here.
I Yeah, I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know what to think, I'm just like, throw the kid up there, put some, sheet music up, and I think that I thought at the time that everything was in F minor, so I was playing everything in one key for some reason or another, but as I kept coming back on every Tuesday or wherever I went and sat in, people would give me, hey, learn this song by Glenn Miller, learn this song by David Brubeck, learn this song by David Sanborn. It's like, so it was just broadening my musical range, my song knowledge, and going back and doing that. It's really cool too, because I feel like you can learn a whole lot from musicians on a bandstand that have been doing it for 40 plus years, more than you can learn in a classroom. Because in a classroom, say middle school, for example, they weren't teaching music to us in fifth grade, but sixth grade, you could pick electives. You've got band in middle school. So I did band because I was already playing and I had some friends that were also going to do it. So I'm like, yeah, band, let's do it. Um, this is not a knock on my music teachers growing up, but obviously there are some programs in the country that are going to be specifically music based. Like I know that there are some high schools that are the top in the country. I did not grow up in one of those middle school or high schools, right? So it wasn't like the teacher was preparing us to go to national competitions. We had teachers that got us through the songs, made sure we knew our scales, did a test every now and then, and that was it. And in high school, kind of the same thing. It was we played the songs and we did some regional festivals, like we went out to San Bernardino, or we do Mount Sac every year. We'd go to Riverside would put on a festival with some high schools from Riverside County, for example, but it was never on the national level. So because of that, the teachers aren't pressing you to know a lot of theory or like more complicated things with music, specifically jazz. So that's where I felt like it benefited me to go sit in with different bands during the week and on weekends where these guys are playing like jazz musicians should. And they're going to teach you wrong from right. They're going to tell you, hey, play this over this chord or play this over this transition here. And the more that I went, the more that I caught on to certain things that they're doing because I'm not just listening when I'm up there, but I'm listening. I remember sometimes my brother would come along and he's a photographer, videographer, and we got him an iPad when he was very young and he was shooting stop motion videos with his Legos at 8 years old. Come to, find out that's what now that's his career is videography and photography. But I was always get mad at him when he wasn't paying attention to the band for whatever reason. I guess I was a stubborn 12-year-old maybe, but I was always also paying attention to the band when I wasn't playing because I was picking up on what else they were doing during different songs or different, say they were playing Girl from Ipanema, maybe they approach it a different way than, you know, they do in the original record. So I'm thinking it's just all these different things that gets my mind going, right? That gets your mind musically going, like, oh, okay, I guess it's allowed to play something this way or improv something a different way than you usually would. So all this, and as a kid, I guess you absorb things more when you're younger, or you absorb things better when you're younger, right? So as a kid, getting exposed to a lot of music, going out and playing with different bands, not just jazz bands, but I would go sometimes play with DJs as well, where their stuff is like pop. And so you learn to how to play with a DJ and what their, little quirks are like, how they transitions between songs and if they're going from song to song in the same key and all this different stuff. So playing across different genres and playing live with different bands as a young kid, I think was the most beneficial thing to my upbringing and my learning curve, if you want to call it that.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Yeah,
There's no question about that.
yeah,
I want to dive into this a little bit more. When
yeah.
you're playing with these bands, like let's say the first times you're doing these. Um, oh, and let me also backtrack a little bit too. How did you learn the songs? By ear or by
Yeah.
reading?
Well, I'd say a great majority of stuff, everything I learn even to today is by ear. I think I was born with perfect pitch, which yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones, I guess. But it's something that I've always had. In fifth grade, here's a great example. Fifth grade, I was in choir, and I was playing sax at the time. Fourth and fifth grade, I was in choir, but in fifth grade, at the very end, they wanted me to play sax because another girl played drums, and they just wanted us to show, kind of show off that talent, I guess. But the problem was they didn't have alto sax music. They didn't have it in E flat. They have everything in concert C because that's how the kids are singing. So they gave me the recording, they gave me the music sheet in concert C. I went home and figured out note by note. I would pause the recording like every second to pick apart every note, find it on the saxophone, play until I find it, write it down, transcribe it on, your sheet music. And that was my first memory of really using my ear in transcribing music, learning stuff by ear. So then, nowadays I can't just listen to a regular song without picking out chord progressions and what key the song is in and where it's going, which is it's it's really awesome to have, but at the same time, it's also quite frustrating because you can't just like I can't just be a regular person and sit and enjoy a song for what it is. Like I don't, maybe down the road my hearing will I don't want to say it will go, you know, decrease or like, the quality of my hearing will decrease. But as of right now, my ears are just locked on to anything that they hear. So a good majority of what I'm learning is by ear, yes.
This is
But not, yeah, yeah. Also, not to say like I do know how to sight read. I've grown up sight reading a lot of stuff. I love a great way of how I practice is I do a lot of stuff by ear, but I also do a lot of like sight reading solo practice as well, which really, keeps that skill going because it's a skill that as a musician is necessary because if you're thrown in a situation and I'm sure you agree, I'm sure you've been in this same situation. If you're thrown in a, you know, big band that, you don't know any of what they're going to play, but you've got the music, it's like, okay, here we go. I got the music, know how to read, no problem. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I'm curious too, two things. I've taught a lot of students that have had perfect pitch, and in one particular family, in particular, when I was teaching in New York, and what's interesting, the parents had them play string instruments first, and then they came to me, and I taught them like brass and saxophones and all that kind of thing, and
Yeah.
trombone and trumpet and all that kind of thing. But all those kids said to me was that they had perfect pitch, and it was making that transition, like it was weird for them to understand a transposing instrument. So like when you have
Yes.
perfect pitch, like, I could play a note on a keyboard and you're going to say what that note is in concert pitch. But what
Yes.
was that like, you know, playing an E flat alto saxophone, knowing that a C on a piano is not a C on the alto. So like,
Right.
you think of it as, concert C, or are you hearing an alto A? Like, how do you think about that?
You know what? I think of it like this because I'm mostly a tenor, like I love playing tenor sax. So I hear everything in the pitch of B flat tenor,
Oh,
right? So that's how I think about it. So a C is a D on tenor. So that's, if you play a B flat on piano, it's going to be a C on tenor, but that's just like I hear a C, but then my brain automatically knows to make that switch. It's also funny because recently I had a flute at 12 years old and I played for a little bit and I just, I've always just kind of had it around, but I play flute a majority of Al Stewart's show, I play flute on. So that's another thing that you kind of have to wrap your mind around, especially if a majority of what you do is just a sax player, you have to worry about the transition between, okay, B flat and E flat. And if you want to play a song that you usually play on tenor, you want to switch it up and play alto. Like my brain just, by this point, it's just an automatic. The fingers know what to do, brain knows what to do. I don't have to think about it. The flute took a little bit because that is in concert C as well. So now my brain has to compensate for a third key,
yeah.
where it's like this is something I am seriously doing because I'm doing it in an Al Stewart show. So now not only am I playing, and I don't play tenor on the Al Stewart show, I play alto and flute. So they're two keys that is I would not call my main source of, what the brain is thinking. So it took a little bit of getting used to, I want to say, at at first, but in my mind, like I could, how you sometimes like you can hear the sax in your mind and you could just kind of like play along with your fingers and stuff.
Yeah.
That was tough to do at first with flute because, in concert C, you got to retrain your mind and that whole thing. But now I'd say I'm pretty comfortable with doing that. But all goes to say, it's quite difficult. It's quite difficult if you're just starting out and you at whatever 10, 12 years old, it's over time muscle memory builds up and your brain after hearing what you play so many times. If you play the G scale, I'd say 200 times, it's like, okay, your brain is going to automatically just start thinking, okay, this is what a G scale sounds like. So now you've got that tone kind of ingrained in your brain. So it's that's a big part of how I've learned is just, repetition through sound, repetition through tone, um, repetition through muscle memory, I feel like is such a huge thing when it comes to your playing because if you've got a good muscle memory across different instruments that are in different keys, that's quite a useful skill to have, I'd say.
Yeah, and let me ask you, when did you realize that you had perfect pitch?
Um, at a very young age, I'd say maybe 10 or 11. 11, I want to say, because I was learning songs. I didn't have sheet music for a lot of songs that I had records of Mindy Aber and Dave Koz, Gerald Albright. Didn't have any sheet music to go with it. So I would put their CDs in my CD player and just listen to it and pick apart the notes, kind of like how I did with the choir thing at 10 years old.
Right.
Same thing. And, just picking apart things by ear. And that's when I was like, okay, maybe this is a thing. And I don't remember exactly the moment where I figured out, oh yeah, you've got perfect pitch. But I'm sure someone told me down the line, oh, so you're one of those kids. And I'm like, one of what kids? What do I have? And they probably said, oh, you've got perfect pitch. And I'm like, what's that? So I
Yeah.
probably grew up not really understanding what it was. But then obviously over the years you practice it and ear training is such a big thing for musicians too. And I'm gonna say something, I don't know, some people could say controversial with music, but I feel like perfect pitch is something that, and I'm gonna figure this out one day, how it can be taught, but even if someone doesn't have it, I feel like it can be taught by someone. And it might take a long, long time for someone to learn it, but I'm gonna figure out how this makes sense one day. Because I feel like what I was saying, if you hear someone play a C on piano time after time after time, it's gonna be in your brain. And I just feel like there's got to be a certain point where it's so tattooed in your brain where okay, that's a C, and you're able to differentiate between a C and a D and so on and so forth with the different notes. But that could just be my thought process because it comes so easy to me that maybe I just think like that and other people have a different perspective on it. But that's a goal of mine is try to figure out like the science behind it one day and see if it's applicable with everyone, every musician. So yeah,
What most people would say is people develop really good relative pitch. You know,
right.
so like the people that have perfect pitch are listening, you're not just listening to a pitch and you're listening to more than just the pitch. You're also listening to the timbre, you listen to the quality of the tone,
Yeah.
all the nuances, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
When it comes to like relative pitch and stuff like that, especially if like let's say you play tenor and clarinet, B flat instruments, you're going to have
Yeah.
more of an opportunity of knowing that that's close to a C or something like that. But
Yeah.
just doing that. I don't mean concert C, by the way,
Yeah.
but just being able to pick that out from experience. But I think you hear things on a deeper level than someone like me who may have better, may have pretty good relative pitch compared to having perfect pitch.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. And it's really, like I said, it's a very, very cool skill to have. But when it comes to a point where I just want to put an Ambrosia record on and just enjoy it, it's like I struggle with that because I can't. It's just like you can't turn your brain off. You can't turn your ears off without picking out something new that you haven't heard before. And then you're like, oh man, why didn't I hear that the
Yeah.
first 100 times I listened to this song? So it's it's good and bad. It's yeah.
Yeah. No, I think this is a really cool conversation, and in your answer, you were also saying how you were learning songs when you were younger. I was going to ask you, like, um, when you were sitting up on those bandstands and stuff like that, you were probably picking those things, by ear, learning them by ear. Were you, I guess my next question would be, when did you start to learn how to improvise and how did you do it? I have an idea of what you may have done, but, I'd rather hear it from you
Yeah.
offhand.
When did I learn to improvise? Just going for it. Just going for it. Yeah, just playing what I felt, getting thrown onto a bandstand at 10 years old. Um, at that time I was reading the sheet music, but then going back and sitting in with the band, it's like I understood, okay, you got to improv here. I didn't know much, but I played what I knew and I played what I thought my brain at the time thought, okay, this is creative. Or I just played, what my brain understood. And as years go on, obviously, you listen to, like I did, listen to different records from Gerald Albright, Mindy. And so you pick up some of the nuances of what they play. And then you listen to an Al Stewart record and you can pick up what Phil Kenzie's playing. You can listen to, I've been really, really diving into a lot of Michael Brecker stuff recently because he's really good. And, you could take a million different things of what he does in his playing and solos and kind of apply that to your playing, but do it in your way, right? Like kind of make up your own thing around that. Like take an idea from him or from anyone, right? Because I feel like music inspires music. Different players inspire people to play different things. So you could take a lick from Sonny Stitt and kind of skew it in a way where, okay, I'm going to take the front half of this solo, but then at the very end, I'm going to, take the second half, but flip it around. That's what improv is, right? And it's all about throwing everything out there, but also making it stylistic, making it melodic, making it musically make sense. So yeah, I would say just playing, sitting in with bands and just playing as much as possible, with different groups has helped my improv skills the most at that young age.
And just the fact that um you got the support, like these were supportive situations. It wasn't like, oh, you're playing a lot of wrong notes, get out of here. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
supported up there, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I'm really grateful for that because that's not something that you get from some musicians. If it's like
Yeah.
a 50-year-old bass guy could see this kid walking up and he's going to sound like a 10-year-old and you know it, but I'm really grateful that they invited me back every single week and that they were patient enough to work with me and tell me, hey, try this here instead of this, or, give me different ideas to then go home that week, work on, come back the next week, and I've got a whole new set of skills. And then they, every week was like that. So yeah, yeah, you're right. Not every musician is going to be like that, but I just happen to have a lot of support from a lot of people and were very patient with me as I grew up with my playing and yeah, yeah.
It's too hot there to be mean. I'm sorry, I had to say that.
It's the heat does something to people out here though, I tell you. It's funny. It's funny.
We're joking around because in like the Palm Springs area, you can get up to 120 degrees.
Yeah, yeah. I've made it my own personal rule that I am not going to complain about how hot it is until it hits 120. And that's when I will say, okay, it's a little hot outside. That's anything under that, I'm not going to complain. I was like, I live here. That's what we deal with. That's okay. If it hits 120, I'll be like, okay, maybe we stay inside today, or stay by the pool or do whatever. So yeah.
Have an umbrella
Yeah.
hat. I remember taking a drive up to Vegas, and I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but it was record-breaking heat. So as we're driving up, going through like Needles, California, and all this other kind of stuff,
Yeah.
I open up the car door to, to get gas. I felt like I was walking in an oven. It was like
Yeah.
119 out
Yeah.
at that point. When we got
Yeah.
to Vegas, it was like 100 and what was it, 121 or something like that. It
Really?
was like
Vegas.
nuts.
Wow.
God.
That's crazy. That's, it happens. It's a normal occurrence out here, but that's just what we desert people, that's why we love it here.
Yeah, but I could just picture though, that's really hard to play. Like all your gigs, I'm sure, are inside because that's really hard to play in that kind of heat. Even at night, it's hot there too.
Yeah, yeah. It's really I'm gonna get a little gear centric right here because a lot of people talk about, how do you play in the heat or how do you deal with reeds and this and that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I would say, if your gigs are outside during the summer, it's most likely going to be at night, but even then, it's going to be hot outside. Now, it's not humid at all out here, whereas, you could get heat and humidity in a place like Dallas, Texas, and that's like, what are you going to do then? But because it is so hot, say you're doing a gig outside, and I've done this number of times. Say it's 100 degrees outside and you're doing like a pool party and you're playing, and a lot of people would think about, how am I going to play? Is my reed going to dry out? Is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? Um, I have become accustomed to playing on synthetic reeds
Yeah.
since I was 15, and I've noticed that that makes the world of a difference, especially playing in a place like out here, because if you're playing on cane out here, it's like you are going to have that problem of reeds drying out very quickly. So a lot of people, even if you're playing inside, like, say air conditioning will go out, and that happens to everybody every single summer. And
Wow.
you still have to play. It's like if you're playing on a cane reed, you're going to run into that problem. But I've been playing on synthetic reeds ever since I was 15, and I actually really, really like it. And there's a lot of different ones to go out there. I was playing it's not called plastic. Well, I was playing the Diodario plastic covers for a couple of years just until Silverstein came out with one that is really, really great. And they've been working on their products for a while. At first, they were kind of in the test stages with these reeds because they were just getting into it because it seems like that's the hot new product on the market for sax players, right? Like Leger and all these different companies are
Yeah.
starting to come out with synthetic reeds. So Silverstein started making theirs. And like I said, at the beginning, they were kind of in the test phases and they needed to figure out a couple things. This past NAMM, I actually switched to playing those, and they're incredible. Really, really great. They get the same tone as you would a regular cane reed. Um, you don't ever have to worry about, them drying out or becoming brittle in a climate like where I'm at. You can play them anywhere. So they're great. Yeah.
The ambi-poly reads,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, and how long can you play? Number one, do you rotate those reeds? And number two, how long can you get out of a reed, out of the ambi-poly reeds?
Yeah, yeah. So Silverstein on their website says that a read can last you up to 6 months, which,
Okay.
depending on how you're playing, I would say is true. For me, because I'm playing different styles, say I'm playing jazz, like tonight is Tuesday, we're at Vicky's of Santa Fe with the Slim Man Band. So I'm going to be playing a little harder on some songs, which is going to wear down the reed, right? So it's going to wear down the life expectancy of the reed. So and I've only been playing these things for 4 months, but I would say my life expectancy on a reed, which, with my style of playing, which varies from sometimes soft to very aggressive, I would say 2 to 3 months is like your window of this reed is going to have the same consistent tone. It's going to have the same, attack with, tonguing and all the other things before it starts to like you notice the difference from when you first started playing the reed compared to 3 months down the road. Now you notice okay, I should switch to a new one. But even then, I believe their reeds retail for around $40 a reed. But yeah, I know it's a big price for just one reed. But if it's going to last you that long, I would say the investment is worth it. And they are really great. I personally play between a two and two and a half. I play two and a half on alto. I play between a two and two and a half on tenor, and they're great. They are a little harder than your average reed. So I would say that compared to other reeds, a two, compared to a Van Duyne would be like a three. But
Okay.
they're great. They're really great. It's worth the investment, and they've really figured out their reed line now.
And do you rotate?
I I don't rotate actually. I just stick with one. I would say the only time I rotate is if I'm switching off mouthpieces, and the only time I'm really switching off mouthpieces is on alto. I'll switch between a Eugene Rousseau hard rubber when I play with Al, and currently my metal piece is a Beechler Belite on alto. So I will switch between reeds just because when you start to break in a reed on one mouthpiece, they say that the reed has somewhat of a, shape that it keeps after you've played it, right? So if I'm playing something on my Beechler, if I'm playing a reed on my Beechler, it's going to remember what the Beechler shape is like, right? So then if I slap that same one on the hard rubber, it's going to be a little different. So that's like the only time I'd say I keep the same reed and mouthpiece together.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um, with I play Legers, and
Yeah.
I do have I'm looking on my cabinet. I do have the ambi polys and all that kind of thing. I got them a few years ago. I'm sure they're
Yeah.
even better now. They're more
Yeah.
consistent stuff.
Yeah.
What's like a telltale sign that you need to, switch the reed? In other words, how do you know if the reed is dead?
How do you know the Rhea is dead? It's a great question because I am still figuring that out myself. I like I said, this is only I started playing these just at the NAMM show back in January is when they presented these to me, and I'm like, yeah, they're great now. And they are a big difference probably from the ones that you have now where a few years ago it's a completely different read. These are really great. I would say the read is dead to their, up to their 6 month life expectancy. I would say that's probably as long as I would push a read just for my comfortability and the tone that I know I want to get out of a read. I would say you could switch between 2 and 3 months is kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Just if you want to keep the same like tone consistency, right? Like you know what your tone was when you first started playing this read compared to 4 months down the road, you're playing the same read and it doesn't have the same attack to the sound and it doesn't have the same, tone. It's like you can notice the difference then. It's not that the read is dead, but you know that the tone you're looking for is no longer something that you can get out of this read. So that's kind of like I said, 2 to 3 months, that sweet spot is where I would switch the read out for a new one.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
gonna be the vibrancy of the reed and stuff like that, and the
exactly,
response
exactly.
thing.
Yeah.
And with the ambi polys, do you still have? I remember you had to like wet the reed for maybe 30 seconds or something like that. Do you still have to do that with these?
I would say yeah, yeah. Just at the very beginning, just to get some moisture in the read, just at the very start. Like once you've done that at the very start life of the read, it's like you don't have to do that again. It's just at the very beginning, whether you're putting it in a glass of water or you're just putting it in your mouth for 30 seconds, get some moisture in the middle of that read, in the heart of the read, and then you play on it a little bit. It adapts to the mouthpiece, so the tone might not sound precisely what you're looking for, but you play on it for 15, 20 minutes, it breaks into the mouthpiece and you start to get used to it. And then from then on, the read is what you want it to be.
Cool.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
cool. That's good to know. That's
yeah,
good for people to know as well.
yeah,
For sure. And
yeah.
what you're saying, after that first couple of times doing that, then like, like a week later, you could just slap the reed on. You don't have to wet it really quick. You just slap the reed on and you're ready to go.
Yeah, yeah. I would say, every before every gig, before every time I slap it on and start playing, like I just stick it in my mouth for 10 seconds or so. Just get some moisture on the reeds so you're not just approaching it like, you know, especially if your mouth is dry and you're going to a dry reed and a dry mouthpiece. I feel like moisture is your best friend when it comes to obtaining the tone that you're going for or obtaining like whatever sound you're going for, right? And approaching notes, it seems like moisture is your best friend, whether it's making sure you're drinking enough water in between songs and just, not getting dehydrated. And that's another thing that you have to worry about out here,
Yeah.
especially like I play flute during the owl stuff. I have to make sure that playing flute, it's easier for your mouth to kind of dry out as you don't have a mouthpiece in your mouth. You've got the flute right up to your chin here. So it's a little different way of playing it. So, your mouth is going to get drier. So I would just, staying hydrated is like your best friend when you're playing so that you've got moisture in your mouth. That way you've got moisture in the mouthpiece and on the reeds so that not everything is dry and that, that way I've noticed, especially like you know, a dry cane reed, it's so easy just to squeak here, squawk there on a dry reed or a dry mouth. Like you won't run into that problem as much with synthetic reeds, but it's still a problem that could occur if you're not keeping yourself hydrated. So yeah, yeah, just like little details like that you wouldn't think is important to sax playing. It's like that's actually a huge part of it.
Yeah, that is huge. That's a great
Yeah,
tip. And I'm just thinking too, again, like let's say you're playing that outdoor pool party or, an outdoor, it could be at nighttime or whatever, but
yeah,
particularly like during the day, do you ever worry about um like the glue on the pads like drying out? And let me explain. I had a story
yeah,
where I was playing downtown LA in Grant Park and it was
yeah.
October. It was October, but yet it was 85 degrees out, really hot for that time of the year. Um, and the stage was painted black. And
Yeah.
so can you imagine the sun beating down on a black stage? Thank God I got through the show, I was putting my horn away in the case and one of the pads fell off. It's like, oh, thank God the show was
Yeah.
done. But do you ever like worry about that? Has that ever happened?
I, you know what? I don't worry about that. I definitely do not leave my saxophones in the car on a
Oh,
hot day because that's just like literally, I think I would worry more about the brass warping than I would a pad falling off. Literally, it's like that I think would occur more. But a thing about Cannonball is a lot of saxophones they use hot glue to put the pads on them back, right? Is it I believe that's the thing.
yeah, hot glue or sometimes shellac or
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, Cannonball puts shellac on the back of their pads, and I believe that the shellac it doesn't melt as quickly, I think, as the hot glue. I was just talking with a repairman about this the other day, and I think that's what he was saying. I could be totally wrong, but I've never had a pad fall off. Maybe that goes to show like the build of the cannonballs, but I definitely would worry more about just the brass itself warping in any way. Like maybe the bell just kind of goes,
Oh my God.
yeah, I would worry about that. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh
yeah.
my
But
God.
I can't say I've ever had a pad fall off or anything like that during a gig. Yeah,
Thank God. Yeah, and
yeah,
actually, just for my own curiosity too, do you have are there it's not like there's a lot of music stores in the Coachella Valley area
right,
and stuff like that.
right.
So is your repair person in Coachella Valley or do you have to drive out to LA or San
I
Diego?
Yeah, I actually just visited them yesterday. They're called Jekka Music out in Riverside. Maybe I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a really, really great company, family-run company. Jim and Christina, it's their business. They've been doing this for many, many years. They have so many people go to them. They've got a lot of schools that go to them. So a lot of school districts will designate Jekka to come out. They've got a mobile repair trailer that they can bring out to schools. A
Wow.
really, really great trailer. They could bring it out to you, or you could, send your instruments in during the summer so they repair them. I've brought my horns, all of them, to them, and every time I go there, like I just said, I went there yesterday, and it seems like every time I'm learning something more and more about them, about, how to fix the horns. And Jim, he's the one that fixes most of my horns. I've got a silver Cannonball tenor. And for whatever reason, it seems like the pads stick on this horn more than any horn I've got. I said, what do I do about this? Do the old dollar bill trick? He's like, no, you do powder paper. I'm like, powder paper? Why have I've never heard of that before. He's like, yeah, powder paper. It just gets rid of the moisture right away. And he, shows me, I guess Yamaha makes these powder paper sheets.
That's right.
And he says, yeah, just do this and simple as that. Never knew that. But he could go down this line of how Yamaha has made their horns between 1980 to the 2000s. And then, they started making them different in this year, or they started using a different material. Their pads changed in this year. This company uses a different type of sterling silver on their horns compared to this company. It's really, really fascinating just how much that they know about horns and how to fix them the right way instead of, I've seen some repair people kind of talk about horns, and they were great people, but these Jekka really knows what they're doing. They take great care of their sorry, drawing a blank. Not just horns, but all instruments. They take care of all instruments, and they're a really great company.
That's good to know. Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate that. And I know people that are in like the inland area in California and even out in your area too. It's when I moved from New York to California, in all honesty, people think I'm crazy, but the biggest thing I worried about was a repair person because I had a
yeah.
great one at Sam Ash, which just closed, which drives me crazy. But
Oh, gee.
I know it's really nuts, but I had this
Yeah,
great repairman, Kirk, at the Sam Ash and Carl place, and I was frantic, and it took me a while
yeah,
to find people for sure. And I
yeah.
know for a lot of people, it's tough. There's not as many repair people, than there were like even just 20 years ago and stuff.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I would completely agree. I had a guy that lived out in Moreno Valley, kind of Inland Empire area, I believe. And he ended up moving away. So I'm like, oh gosh, what do I do now? And I had heard a lot of people go to Jekka, Jim and Christina, and that they're really great. And just by, bringing horns over there and going over there and talking with them, talking with Jim about, I'll come in with a lot of questions. Why is this key do this, or why does it spring up like this? What was a problem that I would have? Like low C sharp key always seems to be a problem opening, right? Sometimes like it'll get stuck, like moisture will get in there and the pad will get stuck down there. Big issue. And he said, oh yeah, because it's on a spring. It's not like the left hand side palm keys like D, E flat, F, where you could just open those with your hands and just kind of like force them open. It's like this has to be opened by a spring, using your pinky on the spatula, but really the mechanism is down on the bottom near the key. So it's more a spring thing and not just like your hand can force it open, right? So I never thought about it like that until he explains it like that. So I'm like, they really know what they know what they're doing.
That's cool. That's so
Yeah.
good to know. All right, well, I'm going to take another left turn here.
Yeah.
So in terms of saxophone playing just in general, who would you say, like, you're young, right? You're developing your tone, all that kind of thing. Who helped you in terms of tone? Who was like a mentor that helped guide you in terms of tone, in terms of producing sound, even later on, I guess altissimo and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I would say I've been playing with a lot of people, sat in with a lot of musicians over my life career, and I would say that I've picked up a lot from everybody, but the biggest thing I think is just my ear, how it has grown over the years. And I've had a better understanding of like when you're 10 years old and you're playing in jazz band and you play your first blues scale, you think, "Oh my gosh, I am the guy." After you play that, you hear it and you're to your brain, you're like, "Wow, why did that sound so cool?" So now you think you're good and that your tone is perfect and everything, but still like to anyone else, you still sound like a 10-year-old. But in your brain, you think you sound really good. It's like my girlfriend showed me a video of one of her very younger cousins dancing to a Michael Jackson video. And he's got the hat and he's doing the moves and he, looks like a 6-year-old kind of like just kind of swaying back and forth. But in his mind, he thinks he's really doing the moves and that he's Michael Jackson, right? So same thing with music. It's like at a young age, when you're 12 years old and you're playing kind of like these blues licks and stuff, and you're playing this from Gerald Albright and playing this from Richard Elliott, you think, oh my gosh, I sound really good. But in reality, it's like you sound still like you're 12 years old, but your brain, that's what your brain knows your sound to be. So as years go on, I feel like your ear and your brain, they work together and you have a better understanding of what a better tone should sound like. You start listening to different sax players, what their embellishments or technique sound could be like. And you start to pick apart, okay, I like what this person does. Maybe I don't like as much what this person does with their sound, so I'm going to avoid what this person's doing. But maybe I do like something in their playing that I will take from them, and then I'll take an idea from this person, what they say someone does like a flutter tongue. I am obsessed with, I can't roll my R's to save my
I
life.
can't
And
either.
oh my gosh, I have a Hispanic girlfriend and we go down to Mexico sometimes and her whole family is from there. So Spanish is going all around the house and I need to learn and I need to learn how to roll my R's and I can't do it to save my life. But in terms of flutter tonguing, that's like the same kind of thing, right? Rolling your R's, doing the flutter tongue. It's a skill that I need to learn. Huge Groove does this so well. If you listen to any of his recorded, I'm upset. I was just on the phone with him the other day. I'm like, how do you do that? Because it's literally it's such a cool trick. And I feel like, genetics could have a thing to do with it as well. Like some people can roll their R's very easily. My brother doesn't know a lick of Spanish and he can roll his R's. It's like, okay, that's just a genetic thing then. Like you're able to do that easier than I am. Whereas, I have to actually put some practice time into that. But to go back to your question about tone, I feel like it's just broadening my ear for a cleaner sound and understanding that yes, I think my tone right now is good. I thought my tone was great at 19 years old. But if I was to compare myself now to 19-year-old me, I would say it's a night and day in terms of my approach to notes, my approach to, tonguing notes and just like stylistic things, right? I have a better understanding how to approach things in a much more effective, easier way that's going to make my tone sound better, my timbre is going to sound better, everything about my playing is going to be better. So I feel like I could say this same thing 5 years down the road from now. Like I feel like I have a great idea of what my tone sounds like now. And I think it's a good tone, but the goal is to 5 years down the road be able to say the same thing that say now when I was 19 years old, right? Like, okay, I thought I had a good tone then. 5 years down the road from right now, I hope I could say, I thought I had a good tone then, but now I've learned so much more. And it's just from using your ears, you know, picking up on things that you play, picking up on things that other people play, and just always finding ways to be better. Because I feel like, as in anything you do in life, there's always ways to be a better sax player, for example, right? There's always, I'm never going to be the greatest flute player in the world. I know that, like, sax is my thing, but there are definitely things that I can learn and still teach myself on flute for years to come. So, yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, so this is so one of the big themes, from our talking here together is definitely using your ears as a guide. And
Yes.
whether you have perfect pitch or not, that's not even really the issue. It's a question of, feeding your brain good information and
Yes.
being open-minded to listen and being curious and saying, okay, why does that sound good? How can I
Yeah.
figure that out? That's
Yeah.
the theme I see from here.
Yeah, and I would say, it's the willingness to want to learn more, because I feel like, as musicians, and I can definitely say I've gone through this phase, I feel like musicians can be stubborn sometimes, where they think they know everything. There was a time where I thought, I know everything about saxophone. Why do I have to practice if I already know it? It's like, I feel like we all go through that phase, but they're just, I feel like I grew up and kind of realized, why would I ever want to stop learning, whether it's saxophone, whether it's flute, whether it's, what is behind me right here. I just built this for some cover videos I started doing over my YouTube and TikTok accounts. I
Oh,
did not know how to build this before I built it, but it's like, I feel like my willingness to want to learn how to do something like this, like put up all the different, things you see behind me here, is like, it makes you more knowledgeable. It gives you another skill. And just like, the more skills you can build up in your lifetime, it's like, it just makes you, I feel like, a much more valuable musician, right? If you can play, like, I'm playing bass, I'm playing guitar, I'm not any good, but still I practice every single day, and it's just another skill that I love to have. So it's just that willingness to want to learn more, I feel like, is a big thing. That, and using your ear, having a good understanding of what you like to listen to, what you don't like to listen to, and what sounds good to you, what doesn't sound good to you. And then that kind of crafts all who you are as a musician, I feel like.
that's great. And I
Yeah,
was going to ask if you did play bass and guitar, like
yeah,
looking in the background and stuff like
yeah,
that. So you
yeah. Bass, I love. I absolutely love bass. Guitar, I love. Not as much as I love bass. I think because it's so much more complicated, because you have to stretch your fingers so far over so many frets, and it's just like, I I have a huge, huge appreciation for, like, when I started playing, seriously playing flute. I have a huge appreciation for really great concert flautists, and just how easy they make it look. Same with guitar players, same with bass players. It's like, once you start doing this, you then go and watch Flea on bass, or you watch Van Halen on guitar, and you're like, wow, these guys are good,
yeah,
So, yeah,
for
yeah,
sure. Oh my God, that's so
yeah,
cool. All right, so now let me ask you, you know, uh, you played at a very early age, all that kind of stuff, but
yeah.
you put a single out, well, you put an album out, I think at 15,
17, yes.
17. All right, and
Yes.
Steve Oliver helped you with that. Can you talk about like how did you, get in contact with Steve Oliver? How did all this
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Steve, he right now is actually a local resident of the Coachella Valley. He lives
Wow.
right across the freeway, from Palm Springs. And I heard his name at a very young age. I was introduced to him at Spaghettini
Oh,
in Seal Beach. And from an early age, I just decided I, wanted to start making my own music. I didn't know how to do it. I knew Steve was a producer with had a lot of credits to his name at the time and still does. And so I talked to Steve. I said, hey, let's start out with the song. So I came out with my first song at 15 years old. It was a song called On the Chase. And it was, great, great little happy song, great first song to have. And then came out with the same titled On the Chase. It was the album that came out when I was 17 years old. It was a full length EP, 10 songs on that album. And a whole lot of fun to work with Steve, whole lot of fun to experience a different side of music, from the live performing world to then going to the studio and me not knowing anything about that world and then watching what Steve does, how he produces, how he works, the whole process of recording and studio work. It was a whole nother world to me that I just kind of became fascinated with at the time. And after that, I came out with two more self-produced albums, one in 2020 and one in 2021. And I'm currently working on my fourth studio album at the moment.
Cool. And what
Yeah.
can you describe is it a particular genre or is it a mix of genres?
Yeah, yeah. This one is contemporary jazz. Contemporary jazz. I always wanted to, because I'm young, I always wanted to figure out a way to put a youthful flair into my music. And, I'm still figuring that out at the same time, keep it in the genre, keep it, sounding like the genre should sound as far as contemporary jazz goes. So, yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
And
yeah.
one of you, I think you recently released, I think it's East Coast Swing. I think that's what it
Yeah,
was called. Yeah,
yeah,
it's got
yeah, that's
a lot
right.
of funkiness to it and all that kind of stuff. It's cool.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what? That was something different, and that's my my writing style has definitely changed from my first three albums to now. Leading off with that single, I guess it's different than anything I've written. It's, got a lot more jazz elements in there. Half the melody shares it's shared between sax and piano. It's really, really a cool song, and I'm proud of it. Yeah.
That's cool. Now you're
Yeah.
currently working on the fourth album. When is that going to be released?
I would say sometime next year, sometime early next year. It's in the works. Look for it sometime quarter one next year.
Awesome. And
Yeah, yeah,
how can people find you online?
yeah. People, you can find me across all social media platforms under my name, Chase Huna, Huna. You can type in whether it's, Facebook or Instagram, it's going to be at Chase Huna. Same thing with YouTube and TikTok, and I guess we call it now rather than Twitter, at Chase Huna. And I'm always posting where my live shows are going to be. I'm always nowadays posting cover videos of different songs that are trending at the moment or songs that I love. You can also visit my website, chasehuna.com, and that has all my music on there. That has all my tour dates on there, as well as a nice biography about me. And yeah,
That's cool. All right.
yeah,
Well, listen, this was a lot of fun. And I like I mentioned before, there's so many themes here. It's being curious. It's,
yeah,
wanting to know why something works, and
yeah,
embracing that. And
yeah,
it's feeding your ears good information,
yeah,
from the very start, listening to all the players that you mentioned, like the Gerald Albrights, the Richard Elliots, the Mindy Abares, Dave Koz, all that kind of stuff, all like, different sounds, but also good sounds and stuff like that. And, having the curiosity to extract as much as you can, from everything that you listen to, and to embracing new learning. And you've got two new instruments behind you, the bass and the guitar,
yeah, yeah,
and not being afraid to learn more, and up your skill set, and self-producing your albums and all that kind of thing. I think you're doing, incredible job, and it's just, I'm so glad that we met at NAMM, and I'm so
yeah.
happy to have had you on the podcast, Chase.
Yeah, no, Donna, thank you so much. This is so great. I loved, we had a great theme going today. I really, really loved it. And hope to see you at a show really soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely going to
Yeah,
do that
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.